In this video, we're going to be taking a look at interpreting the remainder. Now you will need to have your Go Math book out and turn to page 87. You will also need your math journal and a pencil out as you watch this video. Now the essential question that I do want you to write down in your notes is, when solving a division problem, when do you write the remainder as a fraction? So that's what we are going to try to unlock as we go throughout the video. Now you can see at the top of page 87 it says Scott and his family want to hike a trail that is 1,365 miles long. They will hike equal parts of the trail on 12 different hiking trips. How many miles will Scott's family hike on each trip? Now, what we are going to do first of all, it's always important to underline that question. So this is what we're going to figure out, because if we don't know the question we're trying to figure out, it's going to be hard to figure the problem out. So you need to do that. And I also want you to circle the dividend. 1,365, that's the total amount of miles that they're going to hike. Sounds like a lot. And then also let's underline the divisor, 12. Now it's not difficult when there's just two numbers in the word problem, but when there's multiple numbers that are distractors and things like that, this is really, really important. Now this is really important to know. On page 87, you want to put a star next to this in your Go Math book. So it reads, when you solve a division problem with a remainder, the way you interpret the remainder depends on the situation and the question. So it's not one rule for every type of problem. Now sometimes you need to use both the quotient and the remainder. You can do that by writing the remainder as a fraction. So first of all, we're going to take a look at writing the remainder as a fraction. So the first thing, what you need to do is divide to find the quotient and the remainder. Then we need to decide how to use the quotient and remainder to answer the question. Now remember the steps for division: divide, multiply, subtract, check, bring down. Does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? Extremely, extremely important. Now let's just simply do 1,365 divided by 12. That's the very first step. If we don't necessarily know how to do this, we're not going to be able to interpret the remainder at all. Okay, so first of all, 12 going into 13 here is going to go in one time. Then we multiply 1 times 12, and let's do this together. 13 minus 12, that's going to give us 1. We check, that 1 is less than 12, and we can move on to bring down that 6. Now we do 16 divided by 12. Sometimes I even like to put a little division sign here. Remember, now that we brought down, we just go right back up and repeat the steps over and over and over again until we run out of numbers to bring down. Okay, 16 divided by 12. One time, 1 times 12, we multiply. 16 minus 12, we subtract now. That's going to give us 4. We check, that 4 is less than 12. Therefore, we can bring down our 5. We brought it down. Now it's time to start all over again. 45 divided by 12. It's going to be 3. Multiply 3 times 12 is 36. 65 minus 36 is 9. We check it. It's less than 12. There's not any other numbers to bring down, so that is our remainder. So remainder 9. Okay, now that we have done that, we need to figure out what everything represents. Okay, now first of all, the divisor, which is 12. Okay, remember back in our problem, 12 represents, we can see, the divisor represents the number of trips Scott and his family plan to take. So it's important to interpret every single part of the division problem. The quotient, 113 remainder of 9, 113, represents the whole number part of the number of miles Scott and his family will hike on each trip. Okay, now finally the remainder, we need to figure out what that represents. That's how many, the remainder here, remainder of 9, represents the number of miles that will be left over. Okay, so the remainder represents 9 miles, which can also be divided into 12 parts and written as a fraction. Okay, so you can take that 9 and make it into a fraction over the divisor. So if you ever need to make that remainder into a fraction, it's always the remainder is the numerator, the 12 or the divisor is the denominator. Okay, so that's 9/12. If it were 5 a remainder, it would be 5/12. Okay, so remainder, just think about that R. That stands for right on top of the division, or of the fraction. Okay, just a little way to remember that. Now, what we need to do, write the quotient with the remainder, written as a fraction in simplest form. So Scott and his family will hike. We have 113, that's our whole number. So 113, we need to simplify 9/12 to 3/4. So we can see that Scott and his family will hike 113 and 3/4 miles on each trip. Okay, here's another way that you can use the remainder. We talked about using it as a fraction. Now we're going to take a look at how you can use a remainder only with the quotient. Okay, only looking at the quotient, kind of ignoring the remainder. Okay, now it says the segment of the Appalachian Trail that runs through Pennsylvania is 232 miles long. Scott and his family want to hike 9 miles each day on the trail. How many days will they hike exactly 9 miles? Now what I want you to do is pause the video. I want you to work through that division problem first, and then we'll go through the steps in interpreting the remainder. So pause the video now. Okay, so we can see that first of all they're asking us the dividend 232, we didn't do this, the divisor is 9, and how many miles will they hike, how many days will they hike exactly 9 miles? The key term here is exactly. Okay, so divide to find the quotient and the remainder. You should have had 25 with a remainder of 7. Okay, so that's the first part. Alright, now, so we can see that the remainder shows there are not enough miles left over for another 9-mile day. Okay, it is not used in the answer. Why is it not used in the answer? Because they're asking us how many days will they hike exactly 9 miles. Now, if they were asking us how many days will they hike, we would need to include that remainder and make it 26 days, for example, or something like that. Okay, if they were asking a question of that sort. However, they're asking us how many days will they hike exactly 9 miles. Since the remainder shows that there's 7 miles left over on that day, okay, we can ignore that remainder and just look at our quotient, and that is our answer. So they will hike exactly 9 miles on each of 25 days. Okay, another way, add 1 to the quotient. This is another way we can interpret the remainder. This is the one that we're usually used to working through. Okay, so if we take a look at page 88, it says add 1 to the quotient. Now, they're taking that problem that we just completed. I even kind of gave it away. Okay, so it says, what is the total number of days that Scott will need to hike 232 miles? Okay, so we worked through the problem already. We have 25 with the remainder of 7. Okay, so they're asking that question. Okay, so we need to think through this now. And so it says underneath where letter A, it says to hike the 7 remaining miles, he will need 1 more day. Okay, so 9 miles on 25 days, and then the final day he gets a little bit of a rest. He's only hiking 7. However, that is 1 day. Okay, so Scott will need 26 days to hike 232 miles. Okay, we just added another day to that 25. Why another day? Because there are 7 miles left over still. Okay, now you can also, another way is use the remainder as the answer. So if they're asking a question like this, if Scott hikes 9 miles each day except the last day, how many miles will he hike on the last day? Now the remainder, we understand that that's how many miles he's hiking on the last day. The remainder is 7. So Scott will hike 7 miles on the last day. So if you ever need to figure out how to interpret the remainder, these 3 different problems that I gave you will really help you out when you go to a worksheet and you kind of forget the different scenarios. Now what I want you to do is turn to page 89, do the share and show problem. When you're finished with that, I want you to press play and I will have the answer for you and also talk through the answer. So complete this problem and then I'll have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, now let's take a look at the answer. Your original division problem was 6 with a remainder of 3. Now they're asking you, okay, if Erica and Bradley plan to hike for 12 days, how many miles will they hike each day? So they need to cover that 75 miles in 12 days. So we have 6 with a remainder of 3. So we're going to use that remainder as a fraction. Why is it a fraction? Because they're not asking us how many miles will they hike if they hike for 12, a certain amount of miles each day or anything like that, or how many days do they need to hike exactly a certain amount of miles. They need to cover those 75 miles in the 12 days. So we take that 3 and we make it into a fraction with our divisor. So 6 3/12, that's reduced to 6 1/4. Okay, so 6 1/4 miles, okay, will be how many miles they will hike each day. Now just think about whenever someone asks you a question, you usually do not say, well, I'll hike 6 remainder of 3 miles. Okay, that doesn't make any sense to people. So it needs to be in a fraction form, 6 1/4 miles each day. Now the next question, what if Erica and Bradley want to hike 14 miles each day? So what you had to do, take that dividend of 75 divided by 14. Why 14 and not 12? Because 14 is the amount of miles they're hiking each day. For this problem, 12 was up here. Now then they're asking how many days will they hike exactly 14 miles. Okay, so if it's going to take 5 days, okay, so you take 14 into 75, that's 5 times, okay, with the remainder of 5. So that means there's going to be another day that they'll have to hike, okay, because they are only hiking 14 miles each day. That's why we did not make it into a fraction. And how many days will they hike exactly 14 miles? So 5 days. How many days will they need to hike in total? That would be 6, but they did not ask us that question. Okay, I want you to complete this problem on page 89. You're going to need to use your math journal for these division problems, and when you're finished you can press play and I'll have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, and we have 3 1/2 cookies that each student will eat. Why did we change that remainder into a fraction? Because they're telling us, or they're asking us, how many cookies did each student eat? There was 24 students and they ate all 84 cookies. Okay, so we took that remainder, made it the numerator, took the divisor, made it the denominator, 3 and 12 over 24 equaling 3 1/2. Now what I want you to do is work through this test prep problem, and when you're finished you can press play and I'll have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, the answer is letter A, 3 ounces. And concluding our video, we have when solving a division problem, when do you write the remainder as a fraction? The remainder should be written as a fraction when the remainder needs to be part of the quotient. The context of a problem determines whether the remainder should be written as a fraction, and if you don't quite understand the context of the problem, you can rewind the video, watch a couple of those different scenarios, and obviously if you have any questions about interpreting the remainder, please come and see me.